Max, what do you want for dinner?
Justice. So back in 1992, a lot of people's childhoods would be changed forever when Batman the Animated Series was released on TV, and although it was briefly cancelled after season 2, was brought back and rebranded for a third season, and throughout its 107 episodes, it was actually 119 total episodes through 4 seasons, because it was 85 of the animated series, and then it actually wasn't cancelled, it was moved to the WB, and that's when they rebranded it to the New Batman Adventures, which added an additional 24 episodes, so since it was the same show, it's 119 episodes through 4 seasons, which is still a lot, but I figure I would correct myself because I forgot about the extra season, and I was just plain wrong, so I'm correcting myself right here, but now that I've done that, let's get back into the video. There was ones that were favorites, ones that were least favorites. I mean, when you have that many episodes, there's bound to be duds, but it was a beloved series that created this universe that went on for over a decade. Toward the end of 2022, it was announced that a new Batman animated series with the former animated series creator Bruce Timm was in development, along with JJ Abrams and Matt Reeves producing these projects, and it was going to be set in a different time, more of a 1940s style, and there was going to be some differences from the old series, as Bruce Timm didn't necessarily want to recycle what they did back then, because they felt like that would be too cop-outy and, well, would frankly probably be boring. And recently, Batman the Caped Crusader has hit Amazon Prime with its 10-episode first season, and I gotta say, I didn't really have any super high expectations for the show heading into it because I knew there was going to be changes, but the show is pretty solid. We see Batman in a different light. It's almost like Matt Reeves' Batman, where he's kind of starting out, the police, aren't on his side yet, so he's trying to, I guess, gain their trust while also just trying to do his job and keeping Gotham safe. And they do a lot of things with the villains that I think I like too. I mean, in the first episode, you got the Penguin, who, yes, is gender swapped. I understand that. Again, though, it's a comic book character. Who cares? We get Oswald the Cobblepot, who seems a little bit more darker than the other Penguins we've gotten in the past, because she can be very murder heavy on the people that portray her, which I found, in pretty interesting and different detail about this Penguin than other ones. In the second episode, which is my favorite episode, we have Clayface, which isn't this, little pudgy clay monster, but an actor, as he usually is, who is ugly in his eyes and can only get the main role as a villain because, well, since he's not handsome, nobody wants to give him the lead role as the protagonist, who ends up getting the girl as he does these movies with this actress that he's madly in love with, but because of the way he looks, she's definitely not interested, so he goes to get this procedure done, which basically messes up his face. So he goes on this murder spree, killing all the actors, actresses, producers, directors that were kind of critical of him during that time. And it's just, again, a different take on a character that you can do so much with, and I feel like this is a more realistic take than what you would get with a big giant clay monster, as this is just straight up serial killer with a demented face and a past that's kind of troubled. But it was my favorite episode by far because I think it took what was so good about Batman the Animated Series and Matt Reeves' Batman universe and kind of combined them together to form a masterpiece. In the third episode, we get Catwoman more as a villain here, which Catwoman voiced by Christina Ricci, good casting on that because she did an excellent job. This is kind of her upbringing, her origin story as to how she became Catwoman in this universe, and as per usual, she's trying to avoid Batman while she's doing her antics, but she ended up not being able to do that. In the fourth episode, we get this unknown villain, a villain that I didn't even know about, called Firebug, who, in this show, Detective Flask and, of course, Detective Bullock are trying to lure Batman in, so they think it's a good idea to go to Arkham and release one of the villains that have already been captured, Firebug, to lure him in so that way Batman can be captured and they can get a promotion. But things go awry there. Batman has to save the day. Commissioner Gordon then realizes at this point in time, like, oh, Batman's doing good here. He's trying to stomp the villains. Even though he's getting in the police's way, he is doing this for good rather than evil. The fifth episode features Harley Quinn, who we do kind of see early on in the series. The Catwoman episode at the beginning, someone ends up mentioning Bruce Wayne's mom because they're in a museum and they see her pearls and they're like, who the hell would have wore pearls like that on that night? And Bruce Wayne, who was there, just clocks him in the face.
Oh, fuck. I can't believe you've done this.
So to avoid any jail time or charges or anything, he has to go to anger management therapy, and his therapist just so happens to be Dr. Harleen Quinzel. Now, what's different about this Harley Quinn than other adaptations that we have seen is that, well, this Harley Quinn, when she's the doctor, she's all, flamboyant and, kind of what you would expect her when she's in her Harley Quinn form, but she's a lot of fun and she kind of just has that positive attitude toward her. But when she's in the Harley Quinn gear, she is fucked up because you find out that a lot of her male patients she has been kidnapping because she feels like they are just rich assholes who, don't give a shit about the women in the society, so she's making them take all their life savings and donating it to these women's charities while trying to quote unquote fix them. It's a definitely darker tone with the character, but I do like that they did this because now you're giving her more of a villain tone rather than this anti-hero kind of persona that Harley Quinn has always kind of had, even when she was first created by Bruce Timm in 1992. It's just another good and different take. Then in episode 6, there's the gentleman ghost. He's like a ghost from this family heir. They own this house and the plantation or whatever's about to be sold. He doesn't want that, so he kind of goes around and not only haunts the place, but he will kill people that get in his way. Again, this is Batman dealing with the paranormal, so off of the whole realistic thing that Matt Reeves tries to do, but still an interesting process nonetheless. It almost kind of felt like an older episode of Scooby-Doo. Then in episode 7, we have Automatopoeia, who is just a guy who speaks in words like could be like boom, pow, done to kind of almost replicating what the 66 Batman show did, where Batman or Robin would punch somebody and the words would pop up on the screen, although it's not as cheesy as it is here. This one was another interesting one because this episode revolves around what the police think was a hit on Commissioner Gordon, but you find out the hit was actually on Barbra Gordon the whole time, because in this series, Barbra Gordon's grown. She works at the police department as a lawyer/detective, so she plays a lot more part in the story than she usually does. She's not Batgirl in this series, but she definitely does get into action in this one, and it's a nice episode, and this is where the relationship between her and her father kind of rekindle at this point in time. Then we have episode 8 with another villain I've never heard of named Natalia Knight, who, come on, they just drew Wednesday Addams and said, let's change her name and give her this whole thing where she's got to eat the souls of children to be able to stay young and survive because she's some sort of vampire, I guess? If only you had someone on the show who's played a character like that before. Again, I like the fact that they're adding these characters that you don't necessarily know well, or just creating these characters to do something different. It was definitely interesting, and this was one of my favorite villains because in the end you just kind of feel bad for her because she doesn't want to do what she's doing, but she has to do it to survive. And by the end of it, she just realizes that she messed up to a point where she's just like, just let me die. But of course, Batman being Batman, is like, no, we're going to get you back to safety and we're going to make things right. And I think that it was just a nice sentimental episode where you realize the villain was kind of troubled at this point in time and just needed help. Then when you get to the end of the 8th episode into the 9th, Harvey Dent, who had been trying to run for mayor this whole time, who had been working with Thorne and of course getting involved in the mafia, ends up kind of, snitching on him. So, of course, he gets the acid thrown in his face. He becomes Two-Face where he goes on this murder spree, but by the end of it, he's kind of... It's still Harvey trying to fight that Two-Face persona. It's Two-Face doing the killing. Harvey's like, oh my god, help me. This side of me is taken over. And even in episode 10, there's a little bit of that, but episode 10 has a lot to do with, the corrupt cops are trying to, get rid of evidence as Bullock and Flask are now figured out to be the corrupt cops that everybody's been talking about, and I'm assuming they lose their job, and Commissioner Gordon is now back up to being the head honcho, whereas he was demoted during one of the episodes when he failed to, take in Batman, so Flask and Bullock were promoted ahead of him. Now they're fired and Gordon's back to being the guy who is practically the boss. And that's kind of where we end the series on that note. However, spoiler alert, if you don't want to hear the spoiler, then just skip to this time. I will make sure to put it here so that way you can skip to this time. It is setting up for season 2, especially with the Rotten Tomatoes score that it's got from the critics and the audience. I would not be surprised if that was announced soon. And they had to end season 1 with a Joker tease. I mean, it all makes sense because this one they were kind of trying to ease their way and be like, here's some villains that aren't used too much that we want to put in these episodes, but next season seems like it's going to feature the Joker a little bit, and hey, I'm okay with that because he's an iconic villain, and I feel like you can't really have a Batman series without Joker. You got to have him show up at some point, whether you don't want him to show up a lot or not. You know, you still got to put him in there somewhere to show that, like, hey, Joker exists. I mean, it makes sense since Harley Quinn exists in this universe that Joker would be in here somewhere. So expect him in season 2, whenever that may be. If you like dark noir kind of gangster stuff, then this one will definitely be for you. And I'm glad that it wasn't just a straight copy-paste from the original animated series, because as much as I loved the animated series back then, I just think trying to do it over again would have been the wrong way to go without any changes. But changing things up and doing things differently, I think, has made this series so much more interesting, and it makes you want to follow everything even closer. But that's just my opinion on it. Would love to hear in the comments below what do you think about it. But until then, that is it for me. Stay safe out there, and I will catch you all in the next one.